I met JPP earlier this year when we worked on a project together for Longlead, and he serves as the executive editor. I hope I got that title right of Longlead. He's the boss at Longlead,
I'm the
and
founding editor. Yeah.
founding editor. And JPP, maybe you could just introduce yourself for us and tell us what you're all about.
Sure. Yeah. Again, John Patrick Pullen. You know, my bio works a little funny. It's I was a longtime freelancer. I'll tell you, this is where I do my sorry, not sorry, and maybe my our friend from Alaska can identify with this. When I got into journalism, my goal in life was to work at the highest levels of journalism and never live in New York. And I'm not sorry about that, Russell. I'm not sorry about it. It's
I
just
don't
not
blame
my
you.
kind. Yeah. Well, there's been a little bit of an exodus among journalists, but you know, doing what we do should allow us to live wherever it is we want to live and function at a high degree. And I think, if there's one gift of the pandemic, it's a little bit of that. And Longlead was born during the pandemic, but it was the fruit of kind of my career, where I began as a freelancer. And then over the course of my career, I ended up with two really big clients. One was Time magazine, and the other was Fortune, and they both were under the Time Inc. umbrella. And at one point or another, I said to them, you need to hire me. Like, legally, you need to hire me. But also, they were selling themselves off to Meredith, and I knew they were going to cut their freelance budgets. And I said, you just need to hire me. So they did. And I was on staff as a news editor at Time. And then when the sale to Meredith went through, they were reshuffling all the deck chairs, and they actually traded me from Time to Fortune for money. I don't know how that works, but I've never felt more like a baseball player in my life. And I served as tech editor over there, and I'd had a long relationship with them as well. But then the pandemic hit, and everybody panicked, and I was the first person thrown off the ship, so to speak, which is crazy because here I am in my office. I live and work right outside of Portland, Oregon, and everybody else, again, no offense to the New Yorkers this time, I really do mean it, no offense. A lot of folks in New York are strapped for space and working on their kitchen tables, and I have an office. Pandemic was nothing new to me. Working remote was nothing new, but it was a good time for me to kind of look at what I had learned as a freelancer and what I had seen working internally and combine the two into Longlead. Russell, if you don't mind, I can share
And
my screen.
yeah,
I don't know if
yeah. Oh,
folks have
sure,
seen.
sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
I don't know.
Um,
I don't know if it's up to me. But yeah, go ahead. If you hit share screen and see
okay.
what.
So everybody can see that.
Yeah, looks good to me.
So this is our website when you come to it. And what you'll notice is, it's a remarkably different outlook than what other media ventures do. And what we do is we invest really heavily on just a few stories, and we pour a ton of resources into them to bring them to life. The video that you're seeing is from our first story, The Depth Shall Reach, which is about the world's deepest free diving woman. Though she has made the deepest dives. Her name is Alenka Artnik. But we publish maybe 3 or 4 stories a year, and we put a ton of work into them. And the idea is this: we want to work with independent journalists and give them all the resources that they need to tell their stories in a way that no one else can do. And so, typically, as a freelancer, you pitch an outlet, let's say Politico, right? You'll write a story for Politico. They'll say, okay, we'll give you 400 words, and you'll say, I was hoping for 1,000. But the reality is, it's like a 2,000 word story. So it's just, a whole lot of whittling down and a lot of pain for not a lot of money. And your stories are remarkable. Not to again call out our Alaskan participant here, but you're there in the community, researching and living stories. why wouldn't you get the kind of support that someone who on staff would get? Great video to go with your story, all sorts of social promotional marketing and all of that. So that's what we do, and I'll give you a peek at.
I'll tell you
Go
that
ahead.
sounds like that sounds kind of like a dream come true as a place for a journalist to work for. But then I also wonder, when you have, so it sounds like you kind of go for high quality with lower quantity.
Yeah,
And then does that make it harder to? I mean, like does that make it harder to earn money? You know what I mean? Like is there, does that trade
sure.
off make it so that you have less product to sell, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're in our early days, and so we had a 3-year plan at launch, and the first year was, proof of concept. Can we execute at the highest level of quality that journalism can produce? And so, we did that. We've won a ton of awards. I'm very, grateful to get to put them behind me when I talk. But next step is building audience and then monetizing after that. And so it's really important for us to be able to ramp up this audience. But that's one thing I want to say to all of you. This being, an entrepreneurship of journalism, focused session, this is a really great time to be an entrepreneur in journalism, because what has happened in social media, I mean, the established publications fell into a well with all of these social networks. They relied on them for audience, and now they have to crawl out of that. Independents like Longlead, or even independents just like yourselves, journalists as brands, it's almost a level playing field. I mean, yes, to a degree, you could say, well, Time Magazine has a ton of subscribers. Yes, they do. You know, Todd, I saw you laugh. You just happened to be in the middle of the screen. Todd, you are not going to be able to compete with Time. I'm sorry, but Todd can build himself into a brand that can compete and can add to other publications. And that's one thing that we're doing at Longlead right now. I mean, we're looking to work with smart people who are developing their own niche followings, that they can bring readers to us, we can bring readers to them. So right now on Threads, right, like everyone's clamoring to build their audience there, and Facebook's manipulating it. They're saying that they're not going to support news, but they do, and they kind of have to. It's a really, really neat time, is my point with that.
Can I
But let me
ask,
show you.
if not
Go ahead.
social though, how do customers find you except for through social media on a digital first platform publication?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one of the key things that we're looking at right now is partnerships. So this is not my first military veterans in journalism Zoom, actually. My first one was when you guys opened it up and did podcasting, and you had Jason Saldana from PRX on. And I snuck into that. I mean, you guys were welcoming and you invited me, and I, just sat there in the back. But I'm happy to say that we're really close to doing a distribution deal for Long Shadow with PRX. So close that I'll actually say it, right? And so partnerships with established outlets are helpful, and especially, it's so different in the podcasting space. Podcasting is this weird parallel internet, and it all runs through RSS, and it runs through Apple, and it runs through Spotify. But if you can get that kind of distribution through radio connected entities like PRX or even Sirius, you can break out. But I will tell you, and I will scare all of you with this, you will go broke beforehand, though. It is, no one's making any money in podcasting right now. And so Long Shadow is very much a labor of love of ours. In fact, our first season, when we launched season 1, which is about 9/11, there were no ads. We do pre-roll and post now, but when come September, I like to kill those off and just let people listen to it for free. We did do ads in season 2, and we make nothing. We're not going to, we'll break even in the year 2500. I mean,
So,
it's never happening.
so is the value for it though that it's like one of those things that demonstrates your brand or brings in more audience too?
There it is. There it is. It's audience, right? We have been successful in attracting a good listenership in Long Shadow, and the stats that podcasts can bring out really show what kind of audience you have. I will tell you that our listen through rate on our podcast is over 100%, which is bonkers. I don't understand how that actually works, but it means that people listen from beginning to end and then some, probably go back and give it another listen. And so not only that, but the sheer volume of people who listen, we now have an established audience so that when we're doing our stories, like People versus Rubber Bullets, or Kurt Angle Everything, we have to activate that channel. We need to actually build trailers, which we did for The Depths, and people go and read the story. We're media agnostic. So, we find the right place to tell the best story. I'll give you a peek at The Depths and you'll see what we mean. We hired an underwater videographer to shoot for this. But the story itself is, it's a narrative. It's a literal deep dive. I mean, that the whole idea of the story was concepted upon going down into the depths with Alenka. So this was our first piece that we ever did. And we've gotten more and more dynamic from here. But where do we go from here? Not every story needs to be crazy and dynamic. And also some stories do. Russell didn't tell you the story that we're working on. Thank you for not spilling the beans, because we've been working on this story for 3 years. It's veteran oriented, and if I don't want to plug us, but like if you sign up at longlead.com for our newsletter, you'll be told when it launches next year. And it's a remarkable story that is text, interactive graphics, video, documentary film. So it's all sorts of things. But that's the way that story had to be told. I will tell you that we're getting into photo essays. So we're building, one thing I always say to folks is that we don't do templates. Everything is built from scratch. And that is indeed true. But we decided to build a photo template for, so that we can quickly iterate on photo stories, which and provide a user interface that's different than anyone has ever seen. But here's Rubber Bullets.
I want to ask about that. So, you're doing all this on your own platform that you've made, and I've talked about this with members. Actually, Mari Mer and I talked about this as well, right around the time of the convention. But so, on the one hand, you're not like relying on a platform to give you a voice. You're generating your own stuff, and then you can make it how you want. Can you maybe just generally talk about maybe the pros and cons of doing that?
Yeah, I mean there are a million, and they're stark. Like the pros are, there's not very many stories that you've ever seen that work like this one. We wanted to tell the total story of Rubber Bullets from beginning to end, but also as issues, because there are specific challenges with these less lethal weapons. So, there's no ready-made Squarespace website that's going to do this for you. That's going to, allow you to embed, visual footnotes. These are things that we just come up with, and we work with great developers to help us bring them to life. But at the same time, it's hard. I can't even tell you. I cannot tell you how expensive this was. it was expensive. A lot of it is the art, which we have over 200, maybe even 300 images and videos in this to tell this full story. And, you can ask yourself, is it worth it? It's a legitimate question. But I think, we are not, we're not activist journalists. I mean, I really try to hit everything down the middle. But if you said that they used to call these non-lethal weapons, they aren't non-lethal. They kill people. So if I can get these things banned or, legislated in such a way, I would consider it a win, no matter how much money we spent.
So there's an impact benefit as well then.
Exactly. And in fact, without diving into content too much, like this Austin story is an ongoing story. 20 plus officers were indicted for use of force down there, and they're prosecuting them. And also the legislature is trying to tidy that up and make it so that they can't be prosecuted. But so being able to make custom experiences really allows you to make the story as it should be and not make compromises to how a CMS that you've already made an investment in forces you into it. I can't, this story, I couldn't put Diver in this format. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't look good. It wouldn't have the impact that it does. But at the same time, there are things that we can and do to try to use what's out there. Like for newsletters, for example, we had a long lead newsletter and it basically announced like, hey, we won this, or hey, here's our new project. And then we decided we needed to do more audience building. So we created this depth perception newsletter that is just about long form journalism and the issues within it. And that helps us to build a pretty good base of folks who we think would be interested in our stories, but we're not just shoving our stuff at them. We're going to the broader world. But we were using MailChimp for that. MailChimp is terrible. It's like, it was just constant pain. So now we've switched over to Substack. Like we will use existing things if they will serve us. But at the same time, then there's all these issues with like being with Substack too. So no sooner did we make the jump to Substack that we said, we should probably just develop this in WordPress and be done with it. So we may change that yet again. But, it's similar to with podcasts. What channel do you want to lean on to promote, right? You think like, I want to promote my podcast in Spotify because it's going to reach both Android and iOS users. But the reality of Spotify's model makes it a little weird. We talked about launching Long Shadow with Spotify, the company, as a publisher a couple of years ago, but the whole Joe Rogan thing that was happening, and we were also in the middle of publishing our COVID skeptic story, Critic and everything, and it was just, when you partner up, you take all their baggage with you too. So it's really hard. It can be challenging, but there's a lot of choices that you can make. But as an independent, you get to make them, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, I'll just mention for MVJ, we also started with MailChimp and quickly switched. No offense to MailChimp. I'm sure they make a fine product for a lot of people. But we switched to MailerLite, which I thought was really good for a newsletter. And I don't necessarily understand the value of like having a Substack newsletter, although I know it's very valuable for a lot of people. Do you have any thoughts on that? Can you kind of explain the world of Substack briefly?
Sure, yeah. I mean, Substack, they've done a pretty good job of building a community, and I'm just showing off this Quirdenkin thing because it's better to look at than me. They've built a really good community of journalists, but at the same time, it's a little problematic the way that they funded certain folks, and people take exception, and journalists have big feelings. So, but one thing that they do that's really nice, that is kind of like a social network, is they allow you to import and share, you know, different newsletters. So Parker Malloy is a great media critic, and she works on the Depth Perception newsletter. She has her own newsletter with thousands of followers. Once we launch Depth Perception, she basically can retweet it within Substack and just send our newsletter to her readers. And that helped us, amazingly to grow. And it's a great act of generosity on her part to do that. But at the same time, it helps us to grow, and then we also can share her work too. So that's one thing I do like about Substack for sure. But part of our idea or thought process around going to WordPress is in this project that we're working on with Russell, and Russell doesn't even know the half of it. We may have a newsletter. So then we're like, well, if this is going to live on the web, why do it twice? Why do a lot of copy pasting into Substack? Let's just make a fast WordPress newsletter and keep it all in one. So, there's a lot of great tools and a lot of different ways to approach it.
Yeah, and I'll mention just since I did work with Longlead on this project, I'm always very guarded when I start a new relationship with anybody really, but with a journalistic outlet, and I really was impressed, where I felt like I don't have to fight for my fair day rate. I felt like, oh, I'm really getting the resources and support that I need here to be able to do a great job and just focus on my work. And so that was one aspect of your business that I really appreciated. Maybe I just have a little PTSD from working with other people too.
Yeah, well, at the jump, I wanted to say this at the jump. Again, I'm not a member of the military. I had sat in on one of your sessions previously, but I have gotten to know your organization a little bit through not only that, but just looking for someone to work on this project that Russell ended up helping us with. My dad was a major in the Air National Guard, and my father-in-law was a veteran in Vietnam. So I wanted to start by thanking you all for your service, and I truly mean that. But I don't just mean it for military service. I mean it for journalistic work. This is a real tough time for all of us, and it really takes folks like yourselves to drill in on certain stories. Watching Russell work, and this is, the last thing you guys all want to do is come here platitudes about Russell and I giving compliments back and forth. But I needed a veteran. I needed a veteran for the assignment at hand. And when Russell got there and on the ground and did the work that we needed, I was just so glad that I had hired a veteran, and I wanted to hire more veterans for this project. It just wasn't quite possible. But you guys have incredible skill sets from your years of experience doing various things. So put them to work in your journalism.
And I'll mention also, there is, in our community, I think there's a call to service, right? And maybe there's a call to adventure too. And so sometimes it's like, well, I can go work for Chase Bank, or I could go, clone corn for Monsanto or something. But if you, I think that our community is so deeply engaged in this. But let me ask you this, JPP, that the one problem that always kind of arises in trying to start your own venture is, yeah, I want to do service, I want to adhere to my journalistic values, right? But this restaurant wants to pay me to review their burger, or I don't know, that's just kind of a random example that I'm thinking about. but it's
Yeah.
tough to maintain what was always that kind of church state wall that existed for, like news magazines, for media companies. And of course that's always been called into question. And now everybody's like Noam Chomsky, manufacturing consent level trained on media now. So there's always been filters of different kinds. But are there things that you do to keep your journalistic integrity? And are there times when you feel tempted to compromise, or when you're unable to do something because it violates your values?
It's a great question. I will say no. Um, and I feel really fortunate to be able to say no, because I know it's not always that easy. Um, I our kind of we have an unofficial tagline at Longlead, which is journalism without compromise. And so if you're put into that sticky situation of like, should I? If you have, like, I always fall back to this, like, if you have to ask, you probably shouldn't, right? And I know it sounds very, I don't know, simple or very white knight, but I just won't do it. I just won't. Um, there have been situations where I've been asked to pursue a story that I didn't have full faith in, and I have, and I didn't have full faith in it. So then I pulled back. But I think it's up to us as journalists to maintain that integrity, to maintain those journalistic values. Um, you talked about service, and again, like, I know how fortunate I am to having come from military families, but for me, I actually was very much involved with Rotary, and Rotary's core value is service above self, which is something that probably resonates with quite a few of you. And I see those ideals in journalism as well. And it's just, you just have to hold the line, though. That's how I see it.
That's great. I'm gonna say, let me turn it over for some questions from the audience. Does anybody want to put your hand up? Have you got a question?
I think I see one from Jackie.
Go ahead, Jackie.
John, so what I'm always thinking about is I hear that you are trying to capture not as many people with the quality of your stories, but I'm always thinking about, like, how specialized should my writing be? Like, as an immigrant, Latina, disabled, service member with a TBI. I mean, it feels sometimes I really want to honor all my experience, and I want to share that with as many people as possible. But it almost feels like sometimes when I go down that list, there's going to be two people that are going to be interested in that very specific. So I'm wondering, how do you gauge what your writing or your writers, like, how broad or how specific as a writer?
Yeah, I love this question. I love this question. I can answer it so many different ways. I'm going to talk about a journalist that I'm working with currently quickly, and then I'll move to more about content. But I'm working with a journalist. His name is Jasper Craven, and he's young. He's maybe in his mid-20s, maybe late 20s. But right out of college, he decided on his beat, and his beat is the VA. And for all you, yeah, I see a thumbs up from you, Jerry. For all of you, that's a big story, right? That's a big, broad topic. That's immersive. That's 360 degrees. But for folks like me, I mean, even for me, it's a big topic because my father-in-law was a Vietnam veteran, and he's 90% disabled. But for most of the normals, that's a niche. And Jasper, he's not military connected at all, but he just had an interest and he dove into that niche. And he has come up with just a real tremendous career digging into the VA, which I mean, I'm sure you all know, right? So I'm a big fan of niches, but it's hard, right? How do you get started in a niche and pay your bills? I can't speak to how Jasper's done it, but I can say that when you're good at something, when you're really good at something, you know, those bills, they find a way of getting paid because you're able to sell stories off of it. But, you know, on a content level, I think, Jackie, your question's great because with all the polarization that we're seeing in the world, our job is to relay the human elements and to bring people closer together and to bring people to better understanding. So the elements that affect your community, they affect other people's communities, but they just don't want to see it. They don't want to read it. The diver story, you know, about the world's deepest free diver. It's not a story about free diving. I don't like swimming. I don't like going underwater. And this story is pure poetry because it's about depression and it's about finding a healthy way to push through, you know, years of depression and family trauma that she had. And that relates to everyone. But it comes to this, it comes to how do you frame it when you promote it? And that's the key, the biggest key that I see in the work that we do. Yes, we targeted divers and got a pretty good audience out of folks who are into freediving. But more broadly, and this was calculated, on Facebook, we really pushed this as a mental health story because Facebook was really under heavy scrutiny for what it had done to people's mental health. So we thought we could pick up readers there. So look at the story that you're writing and try to parse it in different ways. You don't have to write it in different ways, but you have to present it and promote it in different formats.
Thank you. You know, I'll weigh in on that a little bit as well.
Thank you so much, John.
Yeah. You know, well, let me shift over to Kareem's question. Kareem asks, are there any policies or rules about first publishing or sharing with other outlets related to conflicts around partnerships and that kind of thing? Can you speak to that? Is there anything that you can speak to on that, JPP?
Can you ask the question again? I was actually looking for it in the chat and I couldn't. I lost it then.
Sure. Just.
Oh, I see it now. I see it. Yeah. Any policies or rules? Yeah, great. Another great question. You know, it really just comes down to your contract. You can sell a story more than once. I mean, that's how I don't know that I really did that much when I was starting out, but you can. I mean, it just depends on what your contract says. But one thing I will say about working, because it can often frustrate folks when they work with long lead that like we didn't publish the story right away. You know, I have a story that just cleared fact checking and we might publish it in January maybe. And we're doing that because that's the best timing, but she's anxious and she wants to get it out there. And so we've also had like our first photo story. She went on assignment, took the pictures for us, and then just started posting them to her Instagram. And we're like, no, you need to stop. Like, because you're diluting what it is that we'll be putting out there. But once we publish it, please, you know, get it out there. So I don't know if that quite answers the question about policies or rules. Kareem, if it doesn't, maybe you want to speak up and elaborate.
I think that's go ahead, Kareem. Is that you? You there?
Yes, it was me. I just wonder, it's like a lot of news organizations are part of like collectives, and like one news agency might get like the first publishing rights of the story, and like then another organization can publish it after that. And I was wondering, just like, does your organization have that same kind of thing? Like somebody might get
Oh,
first stab at promoting, and or they could be picked up somewhere else.
right. That's a good question. I mean, it really depends on the nature of our partnership with whoever we work with. But our feeling is, because you've seen what it is that we produce, we need to, when we partner with folks, we have to have an agreement and an understanding in the outset. So take, for example, like we're building this story, and if we were to partner with ProPublica, because they partner with a lot of folks, what we might do is say, here, ProPublica, you can have this part of the story and run it in your CMS, and package it however you like, but just make sure that you're linking to the main experience, so that if people want to read on or read other elements of this, they get the experience that we're building in our platform. But we don't syndicate, which is what I think in some ways what you were asking about, Kareem, where it's like, AP, they write stories, and then all the other publications can just pick them up because they have deals with them. We don't do that.
I want to just try and by the way, these questions about content and partnerships are very cool, but they're also very big picture, and I kind of want to force you into a bit of a smaller hole, and ask you, John, like, who do you see as your customers, and what is your model for generating revenue through Long Lead, and is it new enough that's still kind of like a long-term goal, or how does that work for you right now, as you're on this kind of the drunken walk of the entrepreneur, right?
Yeah. We right now, we are not in a revenue generating mode, but we're looking at how we would if we wanted to, if we want to go through those aspects. And I can point to specific models that work. Epic Magazine is one where they work similarly to us. They only produce every so often. They partner with New York Mag or some of the other larger outlets to get their stories out. But what their model is more, they want to work with the journalists, tell the story, share the movie rights, and then work with agents and package them on and move them on and get revenue off the back end. That's not something that we do. In fact, we very much don't do that right now. What we do
just to clarify, to specify that, you mean like they'll produce a story that's going to go be sold to like Amazon as a documentary about something, and then based on the story that was written, or to like Hollywood and Mark Wahlberg's going to star in it or something? Exactly.
Actually, they got their start with Argo, the movie Argo. So, and there's a lot of companies that kind of function in that way, and especially with the boom of streaming that we just went through. But we specifically don't do that, and there's a reason. It is that I want writers to make money and pay bills, and I don't think it's right for us to make money off of your back later. So, and it's a differentiator for us, right? Epic's been out for a while. People go and pitch Epic. They want to get their story landed with Epic. Cool. You should, if that's what you want to do. But we're going to let you keep the rights. So if you've got a great story that you think you can turn into a movie, come to us. Don't go to them. But they also have apparatuses, behind them that you're more likely to sell the movie with them than with us. Like I will say with the diver story, like there was interest, and every time I got you know, an agent or a scout looking into that story, I was just like, yeah, here's Zan's email address, go get him. You know, just put our name on it at the end.
And this I'll say too about this. It's like there are changing perceptions in the world right now, generally about ownership, right? Who owns the story? And
Right.
the person that it happened to, is it the person who wrote about it? And you know, I think that business model kind of challenges the status quo on that.
Yep.
And also, and that's another one of those areas that feels like it can be risky too, where now people are telling a story because they want to get Ben Affleck to play them, right, in Hollywood, and then maybe the story changes a little, right?
Right. Yep. For sure.
All right. And okay, it is now it's now been 45 minutes, so I'd like to give JPP a rest on talking about Longlead and the great work that he's doing there, and just kind of open up the room in general to ask some questions, or to just kind of talk about some ideas. And John, if you can stick around, I'd love for you to chime in and give your thoughts on this. But really,
Yeah.
I don't want to feel like any one person owns this room, right? We're a fellowship here, and so if you guys have thoughts, I remember Marimer, you were asking questions during the convention about LLCs and things like that. But if there are any questions that are kind of buzzing around your head about your own ideas, or about struggles that you're running into while you're thinking through your business models or your plans to do great journalism, I'm just going to shut up for a minute, and you guys just raise your hands and throw something out there. Go ahead, Daniel. Hey, Dan. Hey, good to see you, bud. You're on mute, by the way. Dan, you see you're on mute there? You're muted. This is member Dan Gorman, one of our earliest members of MVJ, by the way, who's kind of a hybrid LCSW social worker and a journalist. Did I get that right, Dan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, social worker.
Nailed it. Go ahead. The
Hi,
floor is
Dan.
yours, Dan.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So, yeah, no, I had this idea recently. I know I reached out to you about it. I'm not still muted, am I? Okay, no, I'm okay. I guess my question would be for everyone, how would starting like a hyper local type of news, so like less than 30,000 people, unless that's not hyper local, but population 30,000 people, like a city in New York, let's say, that really doesn't have its own organic news kind of outlet. Everything is reported from outside the area. So I guess like my question would be sort of how to get it off the ground and conceptually, but also like funding and, you know, are there grants? Are there organizations that will work with like very small markets that are very niche focused geographically, so to speak? Yeah, I guess that would be my question. Is any tips, starter tricks or anything like that to get something like that off the ground?
I'll weigh in first, and then I'll let everybody else tell me I'm wrong. And this is kind of I think the fun of entrepreneurship is, you know, there's no absolutes, right? You know, and for everybody tells you that something can't work, there's someone who can prove that it can, and so my opinion on this, generally speaking, and maybe I'm a bit of an optimist, but I think that you know, right now we are especially witnessing the collapse of local news. I think there's an enormous growing need for ways to fill that gap, and for ways to inform communities that are regionally or geographically based. Personally, I think you know, my opinion is go small. The smaller the better, and pick a small enough community that you and maybe the person that you're working with, hopefully you have some friends too that are like-minded, or maybe you could find some through MVJ. But I think it is a valid pursuit, And I would say my advice on it is to start small with it, but be consistent, start small, be consistent, look for ways that you can build your audience. The other thing that's really strong about this, and you see this with, right now, the most active model that seems to be working for some journalists on this is in the Substack model, right? And a lot of times the people who do these Substacks already have, maybe they're already the Metro reporter for Wichita Falls or something, right? And so they're already engaged in stuff at the where they're going to city council meetings, and there's some stories that they're pitching that aren't getting through, and then they'll start a Substack for what they think is interesting, and they'll start building a following that way. And so that's kind of an organic way that I've seen it happen. But my opinion is that there is a space for that. I think that newsletters are an excellent way to start, because it's kind of it's kind of a low barrier for entry, and something where you can look at Substack, look at those platforms, look at maybe just doing your own proprietary one if you have a way to contact that audience, right? Like if you're in a really small region. And by the way, this is gonna sound like the stupidest thing ever, but like even like literally like getting a printer, printing things out and bringing them to your local bodega where you want to attract new customers. Like I know they say like print is dead, but yeah, maybe it's dead for for various tribunes and things like that. But there's actually real ways to just use like no kidding printed newsletters to, especially for a small community, to engage a small community, build a following. And one more thing that I'll mention on this topic, just in generally having thought about it, and also because JPP touched on it when he talked about impact journalism, a lot of those Substacks that are finding success in a hyper-local market, sometimes their audiences are not that large, but their audiences are very influential. So you'll find that a lot of politicians, a lot of lobbyists, if you're writing the best newsletter that's covering, whatever, District 4 in Queens or something like that, if you're writing the best content for that, then I think that you can find an audience, and you can find like a successful method of impact journalism that way. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts. Anybody else want to kind of like weigh in and prove me wrong, or offer something different than that idea?
That was great. Thank you.
Go okay. Go ahead.
It's other questions I had.
Hey, Russell, can I chime in on that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Ethan. And then Marimar, you're next.
I threw up in the chat a link to the Press Forward initiative, I guess, which is, it's as I understand, they already gave out some grants, but they'll be opening it up again in 2024. And you can read about it, but it's basically I think it was like a $500 million initial kind of endowment or investment to fund rural, local news, not just rural, but like local news projects. And so if you have an entrepreneurial venture or something that you're trying to stand, your hometown doesn't have any newspaper or publication serving journalism, then you can certainly put together a proposal for something like that to get some seed money. But that's just to piggyback off of, I agree with everything Russell said in terms of starting small and building an audience. I think the important thing is to always remember that you have to think of the service of journalism as problem solving, right, and creating value in people's lives. And unfortunately, the economic picture is that people have been programmed for the past few decades here to believe that news should be free. And so even though people value the watchdog factor of the fourth estate in their community, they may not necessarily value it enough to pay for it. It may just be another expense in their life. So long story short is absolutely, like do the entrepreneurial venture in your local hometown. But it is a grind, and there's a lot of challenges, and hopefully, organizations like Press Forward though can provide the investment. So that's my thoughts on that.
And I'll mention one more thing on Press Forward. one of the big things that they're looking for in that is sustainability. And so they don't want to see that like, okay, I need $40,000 to start this, and then next year I'm going to need another $40,000 to keep it going. The idea is that they want to see a proposal that can, quote unquote, save local news, right? And so that's the idea with that. I'm gonna go to I've got go ahead, Karan. I see your question in the chat there. Go ahead.
Everybody. So first of all, Longlead is gorgeous. The beauty of your website is incredible, and I don't necessarily have access to programmers of that level, but I'm curious of your input on what resources you can offer so that I can tell more dynamic stories utilizing video integrated with words, integrated with sound, in a really progressive way, because I really want to stand out in that way, but I find myself piecemealing things together, and it's taking long and it's starting to cost some money, which I don't mind, it's expected. But what are some suggestions or resources you have, and anybody can contribute to this, to telling more dynamic stories that are rich and full in a multimedia approach versus just a blog or just a Substack or just a website?
Yeah, it's a really great question that I'm not going to have a great answer for. That isn't, things are expensive, but I will say this, and this kind of also goes back to Dan's question in a way. When early on, before we had launched anything, when I was talking with writers, I would actually challenge them to think of what the act of publishing is and means, and finding the right audience, not the biggest audience, but the best audience for your work. So one thing that I would say is like, all right, let's go on two little imagination journeys. One, we're going to write a story about Twitter. This is at a time before, when it was called Twitter, and it wasn't run by a guy who runs a car company. And we're going to write this story about Twitter. Why not just publish it as a whole, thing of a thread of tweets? Because your audience is on Twitter. It's about Twitter. The story is about Twitter. Like, let's say we're doing Twitter financials. Just publish it as a Twitter thread, because it doesn't need to look gorgeous. It needs to be able to find your readers, and the readers are there. On the other end of the spectrum, let's say we're doing a story about legislation, right? There's really only 50 or 100, or, if you want to include the House, but they can't get anything together, 100 senators that you want to read this story. So write the story. We will print it in gilded edge, leather, back hardcover books, and ship them to the senators' offices. That is an act of publishing. I mean, it's very micro, but you're hitting them, you're getting them. There's no guarantee that a senator will actually look at it, but you see the point, right? It's not about flash. It's not about video. It's not about, sound or great, audio, which, yes, we have put our assets into making those things happen, but it's about hitting, and this is the key, Dan, hitting the reader where they are, finding them where they are, meeting them there, to Russell's point, print it out and put it in the bodega. That's what matters most.
I'd love to piggyback
in terms of making things look better. I mean, it costs so much money. It does. That is the truth.
What you do, what you do at Longlead, what Longlead does rather, and I think it's because they're focusing on quality over quantity, right? This is something too that I feel like we've done, or we've worked to do with MVJ, and I think the people in this room are a pretty good testament to that, right? Where it's like we didn't want to, we wanted people who really wanted to do journalism, and we wanted to really appeal to veterans and spouses. And so we find people, a lot of people in this room, like, we found you, you didn't find us, you know what I mean? And so some of that is kind of like resource allocation, right? So it's like, okay, I've got so much money, and I've only got this much money, and I want to tell a story about this. And so, what is the best way to allocate those resources? And today, in the resources that I'm going to share with you, also there'll be some guidance there on how you can sort of make those decisions and how you can think about where you're spending your revenue.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Thank you, Karan. All right, and sorry, just one more thing that I wanted to mention on that. So, like, in a different model than what Longlead is doing, like the plan, and I hope we hear from Marimer tomorrow. But like the plan that Marimer has is really focused on a high quantity of content as well, because she's talking about part of her idea involves serving a community with a whole bunch of stories that they need, but that they can't access because of language barriers and things like that. And so quantity becomes something where, well, maybe that's where I need to devote my resources. And in a case like that, then it's like, okay, maybe I've got to find one medium to focus on, and do that one medium very well, as opposed to Longlead, which is medium agnostic, and they're working through all these different mediums, right? And then one last thought that might be specifically good for you, Karan, is, I don't know much about Wix or those other things, but like, honestly, just the built-in what do you call it? Web design tools that they use, just when you get one of those, like just my own russellmidori.com or whatever. I'm amazed at how
Squarespace.
Squarespace stuff. I'm amazed at how versatile that often is, and how much stuff I can do with it, and how strong they are without having to know code or without having to hire a world-class developer,
Yeah, I'm a Squarespace girl, so I built Squarespace sites.
Very good.
And it's grown. I've been with them since the beginning, so I've seen how much it's grown and how robust it's become, and also new ways to monetize what I'm putting out. So that's what I'm building on the back end to make sure that not just I'm not dependent on ad revenue, that I have other things that I'm able to use in order to monetize it.
Yeah.
I will say, I'll reveal that, like, today in a meeting so I talked about how podcasts are on this like parallel internet, but for discovery, like, it's kind of silly, but like, all right, so season 1 was 9/11, season 2 was far right extremism, and season 3, I'll tip you all off to, is going to be about guns. All right, so good luck to us getting discovered on those 3 topics on the regular web. But we had a meeting today in which we were like, okay, we need to start getting ranking in SEO so that we can have people discovering the website more. And Karan, we legit legit, we said, maybe we should just build it on Squarespace.
Yeah. I'm gonna go ahead, Todd. You've had your hand up for a while. What do you got for us?
So I guess for me, it's along the lines of the spending the profits thing that you mentioned there, which is struggling to find sort of quality research tools for some of the things that FOIA and IPRA kind of have gaps in, which is when you're just sort of doing general, what I'd call, I guess, general tools of criminal research or legal research that are less expensive than, say, Reed Elsevier.
Can you be a little bit more specific? Like, what are you trying to research? Like, I can tell you that for me, like, some of that stuff is like, well, I'm on the mailing list for the local, for all the 5 borough DAs, and I'll dig into a story from them, and sometimes I'll even get resources from them to be able to access stuff, or literally, if you're talking about criminal type stuff, there are teams of people advocating on both sides of it, and sometimes I can get it from them. What research is the defense doing? What research? But can you be a little more specific about what you're trying to dig into?
Sure. So, like, obviously it's election season right now. And I've been running background checks on all of the candidates in my county, which is, it's a sizable number of people. I think it's about 30 different candidates for various positions from, this is in rural New Mexico. So we're talking, soil and water conservation districts and rationing water for farms to county commission to judges and so forth. It's an elected judge state. So oftentimes I'll find that New Mexico being as it is, somebody could have the same name as literally thousands of other people. And so like trying to weed out one Ernie Lopez from another Ernie Lopez can often be challenging when looking at, say, somebody's criminal history. Has anybody found any particular success with low cost legal research tools that they've found that don't break the bank like, say, LexisNexis would?
Yeah, that's definitely a tough one, because there's some of those tools are just super powerful, and feel, at least once you're using them, it feels like, man, how could I ever go without Nexus or just a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, the importance of what you're doing is very real. I mean, look at George Santos, right? Like, how did he slip through all those cracks,
Yeah, we have a city commissioner here whose rap sheet is something like 6 pages long, just of the docket numbers.
Yeah,
not the actual cases. So yeah, that's precisely why.
I'll tell you, Todd, I definitely will wrap with you more about this offline. This is a little bit more of an investigative journalism question, and I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole, because I've got like 3 resources I can think about right now, but I don't want to sidetrack it too much, because I want to keep it on this entrepreneurial beat, and in the next 10 minutes we're shifting over to I'm gonna share a pitch template with you guys that so I want to see what other questions we've got. Thank you, Todd.
Yeah, the other thing I just wanted to say is for subscription, I've been using Ghost as a platform, and it's been pretty successful at providing a subscription model for my readers, both on a monthly and annual basis, and that's been pretty helpful.
What does it do? What is there already a community there, or is it, or how does it work?
So it combines these mailing list qualities of Substack with WordPress's content management system for the web. And it varies from WordPress in the sense that it's more geared towards being compliant with Google's AMP mobile standard. So for quicker load times, for local SEO, at least it's pretty good. And there's both free and paid builds for it.
That's really great information, Todd. I just wrote that down. Maybe one of the things that we can, this is we're sort of building the plane while flying it, right? With this entrepreneurial journalism program, which is pretty appropriate to the work of entrepreneurial journalism, I think. But maybe one of the things that we can do is, I bet a lot of people have some cool resources that they're using or that they're tapped into. Maybe we can come out of this with like a good resource list for stuff like that, and maybe we can experiment with stuff, especially if a couple of us start different ventures, and then we're able to kind of test stuff and see if it works, and fail fast and pivot to something else. Thank you, Todd. Go ahead, Jackie. You had your hand up for a minute there.
Oh no, because I have to jump off. I'm wondering. I have a question, but can I save it for tomorrow evening? Would that be okay?
Yeah, that'd be fine. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are you able to stay on for maybe like 5 more minutes, or you got to go?
I have to. Well, I could probably do 5 more minutes.
It's okay. I don't want to overburden you. I know what time is it in Alaska right now?
It is 16:08.
Okay, all right. So if you can stay for 5 more minutes, I want to you know what, Jackie, don't worry about it. I'll send you a really detailed email. I'll send you a detailed email with what I'm going to show them afterward, and and then hopefully that'll be good to go for you. Okay.
Thank you, Russell, for your great. Everybody have a good night. Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Thank you. Everybody's this week. Okay. So what I'm gonna do now is maybe we could do. Is there any more questions or any more thoughts or anything people just want to interject out for the next 5 minutes and get on? Go ahead, Marimer.
It's gonna be hi guys. It's gonna be very fast. Is that something that I think it was Daniel said. For all my research that I've been done, when you are by yourself and you are looking for information that people, because myself also I'm gonna be doing a hyperlocal. That's my idea. One of the things that I'm gonna be looking for to find information and to find audience for that information is about you can go to the Board of Ed meetings, and because there's always, let's say that's people who needs you, but they don't know that they need you until they see you. So you're gonna be providing information that they need because they're gonna be going to work and they cannot be to those meetings and things like that. Other thing that I can help you is when you go to you have to publicize this, but I don't know how you're gonna do it, but you can bring out flyers or tell certain people, but do what they call like we call it a cafecito, which is you sit down, you publicize. It's not a meeting, it's I think you call it in English a town hall meeting. You do a town hall meeting and you find somebody from, I don't know, maybe the police officer. People just say, okay, come this night and we're gonna have a meeting with the security person in charge of this area. And then you can put that in all the Facebook pages that you know around your area and telling them that you're gonna have that meeting. And if you could, you put it in Facebook if you have, but if you can't, but at least you're gonna have be that day, and people who are interested and can talk about not only with that security person, but then you can get all the emails, you can get more issues that you can cover. They can say, oh, I have this situation in this place, can you cover it? And so people is gonna begin, the ball is gonna begin rolling, and people is gonna begin to know that you have a hyperlocal that really looks for the interest and the benefit of the people in the area. So that will be my 10 cents, 15.
That's great, Marimer. Thank you. Yeah, building those client relationships, building your audience, right? And so on the entrepreneur side, it's kind of, it's kind of both at once, right? So I'm going to share with you guys now this template that I put together, so quote unquote. I stole it from this great Salzburger class that they put us through. So I had the privilege last year of going to Columbia University and attending the Salzburger executive leadership program, which is it's a class for people who are news leaders. And so a lot of the people in there were kind of like either they had started their own venture, or they're like intrapreneurs, right? So they run a department at the Washington Post, and they're trying to build something new in that department that kind of follows a design thinking startup model, And so what I want to do is I want to share with you the kind of, they gave us a format for how to pitch something. And what's really good about this format is kind of like what Dan was talking about before, or what Ethan was talking about before on the Press Forward initiative. The things that they're looking for are really similar to what people who are looking to fund any kind of business are looking for. And they're looking for that sustainability. They're looking for, a competitive advantage. They're looking for a way to generate profit. And yet we're trying to balance that with our own journalistic values and with producing something that we're proud of and that informs our audience well. And so the Salzburger program had thought a lot about this, and so I put this deck together, which is very similar to the one that they gave us, and I just kind of want to walk you guys through it now. And And I'll note that this really, like, it focuses on sustainability, the desirability of the product, the feasibility of how you can put it out. And these are really all topics that we're already talking about right now. And then it also goes into a little bit deeper into like the compatibility aspect of it, and you know, and prove that people want this or prove that people need this. And so I'm going to walk you guys through it quickly, and then I'm going to share this with everybody who's in this meeting. And let's see, let me see if I can do a share screen here. Share screen. Here we go. All right, I'm sharing the screen now, I think. Can you guys see it? Okay. Yeah, okay, good. Okay, I can't see it yet, but I will. All right, all right. Here we go. All right, so this is the template that I'm going to share with everybody today, and I'm just going to kind of walk you through it and show you why I like it and why you should use it. And you know, eventually, I think that as your ideas grow and expand, you're going to you'll end up discarding some of this or adding to it or what have you. But this is kind of a really concise method of taking a venture idea and putting it down on paper in a way that you know, people who might be investors will respond to well and things like that. So starts out with a simple title page, and then it's structured, and I really like this. I'm so sorry. Give me just 1 second. So sorry. Hang on. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'll be right back. All right. So it's structured in a way that is, it's kind of set up where, you know, it's like a nice storytelling format, right? It kind of brings you through 3 acts of a good pitch, okay? And the idea is that this is a pitch that if you have an idea, this is what you could bring to investors. This is what you could pitch to us at MVJ, okay? This is something that Marimer and I were talking about as well, because Marimer asked about, you know, we have a grants program that we haven't given out any grants yet for it, but it's a grants program for entrepreneurial journalists. And let me mention, you know, if your plan hinges on MVJ giving you a grant, then, you know, we got to definitely want to expand your potential revenue streams. But but this gives you each one of these slides. All I've left up here is the title for each one. So this is the start of Act 1, and it starts with a bottom-up view. And so the pitch kind of begins, here's my customer, right? This is Oscar. He's a construction worker or something like that, right? Whatever his, you know, give a nice vivid description. And this kind of walks you through how to do on for Act 1, a bottom-up approach to looking at your customers, okay? What is the context? And by the way, I only stuck a picture on this one so that, you know, you kind of get the idea, like you can put pictures on these, and it's, you know, it's meant to be a way to prototype, you know, a pitch, right? So you can put pictures on these, you can make them fancy, but each one of the titles is the gist of what each one of these slides ought to contain, right? So here's Oscar. He's a construction worker, whatever it is, whoever it is that your audience is, or whoever it is that your customer is for this journalistic venture. And then it's going to walk you through what the customer need is, what current solutions the customer has, if there are no current solutions, or how they're trying to solve it right now, right? And then some insight about what that customer really needs that they don't have. You know, primarily you're thinking about, here's a product that our customers aren't able to get without this thing that I'm creating, you know, without this venture. And then this template kind of forces you to think about the user journey. How does this person discover your product? We talked about that with JPP, and he talked about different ways that he does partnerships, different ways that, like, even like the Long Shadow podcast that Longlead doesn't make any money on, it's still valuable to them because it helps users discover their product, right? And then sort of demonstrates what the experience is with the product, right? and how they're using it, what the use is like. And each one of these can be a graphic, it can be a picture, it can be a description. My goal for you to start on this template is that you'll have this template, and it'll get you started. It'll get you going in a direction where you can put together a pitch. And this is kind of based on that design principle, that if you just design something, build the ship, and fail fast, figure out right away when you're designing a prototype like this, you can see, oh, this isn't going to work. I'm going to need to pivot to this. And so actually writing it down and having a template, of this will help you do that. So it goes through these different things that investors are looking for, that grant providers are looking for, including MVJ, by the way, and including the Press Forward initiative, because like I talked about with Ethan, they want to see your growth hypothesis, right? It shifts in Act 2 to a top-down view to talk about the market size, about trends that you're aware of, and a lot of this is based on the different research that you're doing to determine how viable your product is. And one idea is, don't be super committed necessarily to the product that you want to make, because you've got to have flexibility, especially in the early stages of entrepreneurship, where, okay, you've got to figure out quickly if something doesn't work, and actually sketching it out like this. I like this model because it kind of reminds me of storyboards, and I like it as a photographer, But so I'm going to share this with everybody here in this meeting today. And my hope is you don't need to do this whole thing, okay? But my hope is that this gives you kind of a template and something where you can get excited about putting down your ideas. And I hate to time box it so quickly, but last time I gave everybody a week and we didn't do anything. So now I kind of want to see if we could if you can get some stuff down tonight and meet back tomorrow and pitch something. And if you put together, really, it doesn't need to be great. You just need to be ready for feedback. That might be positive or negative, right? And so the idea is that I want you guys to make something, to actually build something and to pitch it tomorrow and to get some feedback. And then that's how I want to do tomorrow's thing, where it's not so much me talking or any people that we're inviting, but it's actually you guys. If we get 3 of you or 4 of you who make one of these, who make these pitches, I think that's going to be a great way for us to think about entrepreneurship, to think about our ventures, to get feedback and shift directions, and to really make this kind of like a more tangible thing to think about. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to share all this with you. I wonder if I could just do one of these and share it now with everybody. Okay, any questions about that, or any thoughts, or anything that we've got 8 more minutes left in this meeting. Is there anything else that you guys want to talk about or think about, or curse me out, or whatever it is you want to do? Is there anything right now that you think is worth discussing here at the end of our meeting? Oh, sorry. One quick question: is Michael Cook here? No, he's not. Okay, don't worry about it.
I have a question, but for some reason I don't see my video here. I don't know. This computer is crazy.
Okay. What's your question, Marimet?
Yeah, I would like to if any time we can bring something regarding dealing with the legal part. I don't know if I mentioned this before to you, regarding like using photos, because I did see something recently that somebody published something that they received supposedly as a press release that came in with a picture, and once they publish it, they begin to receive letters from lawyers saying to cease and desist, because the picture that came in with the press release wasn't not supposed to be them using it.
Copyright infringement.
But there's any I don't know, like ¿cómo se dice? Como like an insurance or something, like, I don't know, so we don't get in that trouble. I don't know.
Yeah, well, your first start is to determine if there's a fair use argument to be made for it, you know.
Mhm.
And that can be so if you are commenting on something as opposed to, you know, so if it's commentary rather than being presented as you know, news, or if it's explicitly for nonprofit or educational insurance. Go ahead, somebody's got a better answer than me here. Would errors and omissions insurance be beneficial here? You know, I'm not super knowledgeable about it. Usually what I do is I just fight people. But go ahead, Ethan.
I'll add something. If you're not like a large corporate media entity and you get a cease and desist letter, take the photo down and it's over. Because you don't have money, and it costs a lot of money to litigate and prosecute someone and try and then get money for the copyrighted, you know, stuff. That's different if you do actual damage to someone's privacy or reputation. That's a different story. But if you're just concerned about copyright, you know, only use, original imagery or stock imagery that is either free or royalty free, or you've paid for it, you know. But outside of that, like, if your question is, should you have insurance? Not if you're a small fish, probably, you know, because one, it's going to be cost prohibitive for you. And two, just, you know, if it's just a matter of you put up somebody's photo when you shouldn't have accidentally, and you get somebody saying, hey, you're using my photo, take it down. Just take it down, apologize, and move on. It would be my advice.
Mary Mark, I'll add, most work done for government agencies is free to use. That was paid for by the people. So if it's a photo put out by a government agency, it's yours to use.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah. So if you're looking for photos of bald eagles, go online and look for bald eagle, put in gov.gov and look at images, and those are free.
Oh,
if
great.
it was taken by a private photographer, that is not free to use. You can always ask permission and see if you can get it. But yeah, government photos and videos are generally free because it's paid for by the people.
Okay.
By the way, Russ, I'm
Thank
here.
you.
It's Mike Cook. You called out for me?
Okay, yeah. No, you. I need. What's your email address, Mike?
It's I'll type it in.
Okay, yeah, type in the chat. Speaking of which, if you go to the chat right now, guys, you can see that pitch template that I put up there, and you can actually just go to that link, and I would say, you know, make your own copy in Google Drive rather than editing that one. You know, make your own template, and then you can just kind of make it your own and do it how you want to do it. But if you guys make something, and even if you just make it halfway or just do a couple of slides or something, and you email it to me, I'd love to talk with you guys about your pitch ideas tomorrow. Go ahead, Ethan.
Yeah, hi. So I got here late. My calendar put like Central Time instead of Eastern Time, I think, or something. So I think I missed a lot of JPP stuff, as you call them. I hope that's okay to use that.
Yeah, that was my first question, actually.
Yeah, but John, I regret that I wasn't able to get here on time for that, and I missed that because I'm just discovering your site, which I'm not really just learning about tonight. But it sounds conceptually, I love it, and it's exactly what I do. And so I think I'll probably send you a pitch. But I'm also just wondering, without like being able to spend any time with the site, and read and consume some of the stories. Just wondering, because I do multimedia journalism, long form, like written text narrative, usually with like an accompanying photo essay and perhaps a documentary short. Is like what I often do, like all together. And so I'm wondering about how long are your articles? Is it like, do you do that kind of thing where it's like, let's do a long form piece and photo essay? Or is it like, we want video over here, we want this over here? Can you unpack it a little bit?
Yeah. Our word count is long enough to tell the story, short enough to keep the attention. I don't believe in fencing anyone in any way. And when you start reading some of our stories, you'll say, maybe you should. our bullet story ended up to be 36,000 words. Yeah, but it was, so that particular story, this might be informative to you. It was pitched to me as, hey, this person who worked closely with police departments in San Jose happened to be shot with a less lethal projectile and very grievously injured. We should write a profile about him. And I said, we could do that if we, and this isn't disparaging, we could do that if we were the Guardian. That's what they would do. But these weapons have been around for 50 years and they're still being used. Why don't we tell the story of the weapons? And that's a much bigger story. And so what we do is and this is what I was talking about in the chat, like we look at the pitch and we try to say, well, what does this story really want to be? And so for you and the kind of work that you do, you have a lot of different tools in your tool chest, but it might be that we only want to use one to tell that story because it's the best way to do it, or we want to use them all and we look at it that way. So it really, it turns out to be a lot of discussion before we even get going. And sadly, because we only get to do so many, sometimes those discussions end up going nowhere, unfortunately, but it's happened.
All right, that's all we have time for. Thank you, everybody, for joining this. Thank you, John Patrick Pullen, also for your great interview discussion and your great advice for everyone. And thanks all of you for making this a really great Founders Fellowship workshop meeting.
Thanks for having me. You guys are doing great work. Keep it up.
Thank you, JPP. And everybody, go ahead and check before you log off. You might want to copy that. You might want to copy what's in the chat there, which is that pitch template. And I've also shared it with all of you on your email addresses so that you can use that. And if you guys email me a pitch, or even if it's a half done or a terrible idea or a harebrained and you only did 3 slides, send something, and let's talk about it in tomorrow's meeting. All right. So I look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Have a good one.
Good night. Bye.